Greetings, my friends, and welcome. So, today we will be reading the third chapter of Homer's Iliad, which is a short chapter, by the way. So, yeah, in case there's some new people around, you can find the previous chapters on YouTube. Well, except the first one, obviously. I didn't know how to record everything. But we'll do it again anyway. And we'll make proper audiobooks and everything. So, how's everyone? Hope you're all okay. I'm okay. Brilliant. And, yeah, I wanted to thank you all for last week and for the week before. And for the follows and the likes and everything. And it's really been really cool how things are going. It's quite progressive, you know. Like we've had like 400 viewers in total, more than 400, and more than 20 followers on this channel, and then we have more than 20 on Twitter as well, and then I have plenty of new friends on Facebook as well. I have had some people asking and everything, so I'm really happy about all this. And yeah, and may it be French or English, that really surprises me. I'm really happy about that. Whether it's English or French, both people and both languages work quite well, actually. So yeah, really thank you for all that. And if you want to dig a bit deeper into Lenorae's character, you can go on Tumblr, because I have my little blog on Tumblr. So for all the thoughts and feelings of the before and after life and all the preparation and stuff like that. You know, I have my own little story and secrets and everything. And I talk about those on Tumblr. So yeah, I'll tell you now how things will be going and rolling tonight. So I'll be reading, obviously, this is what I do. Since it's a short chapter, I'll still have the pause, but it's gonna be like a lot less time than usual, so we might end earlier. I'll still have then the pause, 5-minute pause, while I go and drink my tea. So you can do the same, or go to the toilet or whatever. And then yeah, we can talk. If you have questions, you can prepare your questions and ask them at the pause, so that I'll read the chat just after the pause ends. And yeah, we can talk a bit if you have questions about the characters or anything, about the plot, where it's going, what you think's going to happen, all that. Then the second part of reading, of course, and same for the end. If you want to talk, if you have questions and everything, you can tell me. You can ask. I'm not a specialist, as I said Tuesday in French, but I'll do what I can to help you get through all this. I know it's quite. It's written in a sort of old English. I don't know how to say. I mean, the way the sentences are put is a bit unusual for today, uncommon. It's even worse in French. And so yeah, same discussion. If you want to talk, you can at the end, of course, because I can't read the chat. I mean, when I'm reading the book. So that's it. And yeah, I hope you'll enjoy this chapter better than last week, which was, as you know, quite tiresome. Quite difficult, with all that second part, with all these lists of names and ships and clans and stuff. I mean, yeah, for those who weren't there, you haven't missed much. Well, you have, considering all the lore of the book and everything, all the mythology and the links of the characters with the gods and where they come from, and the relations from the places where they come from with the other places, and the relations of people and everything. Well, it's completely insane. The guy said he wouldn't. I love, at some point in the chapter, he said, "Oh no, I'll ask the muses if they can talk about everyone on the battlefield and everything," but you know. He still does it for 10 fucking pages. So anyway, no more boats. Yes, yes, I get on. Yay! So yeah, we'll start. Hey, As I said, it's going to be a short, quite short chapter. So, anyway. Chapter 3. A truce and a duel. Yeah, we were expecting a great big battle, so let's see how that goes. When all were drawn up, each company under its own commander, the Trojans advanced with a shouting and a din like that of birds. They filled the air with clamour, like the cranes that fly from the onset of winter and the sudden rains, and make for ocean stream with raucous cries, to bring death and destructions to the pygmies, launching their wicked onslaught from the morning sky. But the Achaeans moved forward in silence, breathing valour, and filled with the resolve to stand by one another. Courage, oh! In their swift advance across the plain, their marching feet had raised a cloud of dust, dense as the mist that the south wind wraps round the mountain tops, when a man can see no farther than he can heave a rock, and shepherds grumble while the thief, who finds it better than the night, rejoices. The two forces were about to clash, when the godlike Paris stepped out from the Trojan ranks and offered single combat. That's very brave of him. He had a panther's skin on his back, and a curved bow, and a sword were slung from his shoulders. Brandishing a couple of bronze-headed spears, he challenged any Argive champion to meet him man to man and fight it out. When the veteran Menelaus saw him striding towards him in front of the crowd, he was as happy as a hungry lion when he finds the great carcass of an antlered stag or a wild goat, and devours it greedily, in spite of all the efforts of the sturdy huntsmen and the nimble hounds to drive him off. Thus Menelaus rejoiced when his eye fell on Prince Paris, for he thought his chance had come of paying out the man who had wronged him. He leapt down at once from his chariot to the ground with all his arms. But when royal Paris saw it was Menelaus who had taken up his challenge, his heart failed him completely, and he slipped back into the friendly ranks in terror for his life. Like a man who comes on a snake in a wooded ravine, recoils, and with pale cheeks and trembling limbs goes back the way he came. Thus royal Paris slunk back among the lordly Trojans in his terror of Atrides. Hector had observed his brother, and fell foul of him at once. "Paris, you pretty boy!" he shouted at him. "You woman-struck seducer! Why were you ever born? Why weren't you killed before your wedding day? Yes, I could wish it so. Far better than be a disgrace to the rest of us as you are, and an object of contempt. How the long-haired Achaeans must laugh when they see us make a champion of a prince because of his good looks, forgetting that he has no strength of mind and no courage. When I look at you today, can you be the man, I ask, who picked yourself a crew of friends, sailed overseas in your much-travelled ships, hobnobled with foreigners, and carried off a beautiful woman from a distant land and warlike family, to be a curse to your father, to the city, and to the whole people, to cause our enemies to rejoice, and you to hang your head in shame? And now you are too cowardly to stand up to the brave man whom you wronged? You would soon find out the kind of fighter he is whose lovely wife you stole. Your lyre would not help you at all, nor Aphrodite's gifts, those locks of yours and your good looks, when he had made you bite the dust. But the Trojans are too soft, otherwise you would have been stoned to death long ago for the evil you have done." "Hector, your taunts are justified," replied the noble Paris. "You have not said a word too much. How like your indomitable spirit. Your tireless energy puts me in mind of an axe in a carpenter's hands, hacking its way through a log and giving him the power to shape the timbers for a ship. but there is something you must not reproach me for. The lovely gifts I have from golden Aphrodite. The precious gifts that the gods lavish on a man unasked are not to be despised, even though he might not choose them if he had the chance. However, if you insist on my undertaking this duel, make all the troops sit down and let me meet the formidable Menelaus between the two armies and fight him for Helen and her wealth. The one who wins and proves himself the better man can carry off the lady and his own house, goods and all, while the rest make a treaty of peace, by which we stay in deep-soiled Troy, and the enemy sail home to Argos, where the horses graze, and Achaia, land of lovely women. This delighted Hector. He stepped out into no man's land, and grasping his spear by the middle, thrust back the Trojan line. They all sat down, but the long-haired Achaeans kept up their archery, making Hector the target for their arrows and stones. King Agamemnon had to intervene. "Argives, enough!" he shouted. "Men, cease shooting! Hector of the flashing helmet is trying to make himself heard." The troops abandoned their attack, and silence was established promptly. Then Hector spoke between the two armies. "Trojans," he said, "and Achaean men-at-arms, hear from me what Paris, who began this trouble, now proposes. He suggests that all the troops should ground their arms while he and the warrior Menelaus fight a duel between the two armies for Helen and her wealth. The one who wins and proves himself the better man shall have the lady, goods and all, and take them home with him, while the rest of us make a treaty of peace." Hector's speech was received in complete silence. At last Menelaus of the loud war-cry spoke up. "Listen now to me," he said. "I am the chief sufferer, and I think that the Argives and Trojans can now part in peace, having had quite enough to bear as a result of this feud between myself and Paris, who began it. One of us must die. Fate has already marked him out for death, and then the rest of you will soon be reconciled. Bring a couple of sheep, a white ram, and a black ewe, for Earth and the Sun. And we will bring one for Zeus, and let King Priam be fetched, so that he can take the oaths himself, since he has arrogant and unscrupulous sons, and we do not want to see a solemn treaty wrecked by treachery. Young men are for the most part unstable, whereas when an old man takes a hand in such affairs, he considers the future as well as the past, and does the very best for both parties." Menelaus' pronouncement was welcomed by Trojans and Achaeans alike, as a reprieve from the painful business of fighting. The charioteers fell back on the infantry, got down from their chariots, and discarded their equipments, which they laid on the ground in separate heaps at close intervals. Hector dispatched 2 messengers at all speed to the city, to fetch the sheep and to summon Priam. And King Agamemnon sent Talthybius off to the hollow ships, and told him to bring back a lamb. Talthybius hastened to carry out his sovereign's orders. Meanwhile, Iris brought the news to white-armed Helen, disguising herself as Helen's sister-in-law, Laodice, the most beautiful of Priam's daughters, who was married to the lord Helicaon, Antinous' son. She found Helen in her palace, at work on a great purple web of double white, into which she was weaving some of the many battles between the horse-taming Trojans and the bronze-clad Achaeans in the war that had been forced upon them for her sake. Iris of the nimble feet went up to her and said, "My dear sister, come and see how strangely the Trojan and Achaean soldiers are behaving. A little while ago they were threatening each other with a terrible battle in the plain, and looked as though they meant to fight to the death. But now the battle is off, and they are sitting quietly there, leaning on their shields, with the long javelin stuck on end beside them, while Paris and the redoubtable Menelaus are to fight a duel for you with their great spears, and the winner is to claim you as his wife." This news from the goddess filled Helen's heart with tender longing for her former husband, and her parents and the city she had left. She wrapped a veil of white linen round her head, and with the teardrops running down her cheeks set out from her bedroom, not alone but attended by 2 waiting women, Aethri, daughter of Pythias, and the ox-eyed lady Clymene. In a little while they reached the neighbourhood of the Scaean gate. At this gate Priam was sitting in conference with the elders of the city, Panthous and Thymoetes, Lempus and Clytius, Hiketaon, offshoot of the war guard, and his 2 wise counsellors, Euchalegon and Antenor. Old age had brought their fighting days to an end, but they were excellent speakers. These Trojan elders, sitting there on the tower like chickadees perched on a tree in the woods chirping delightfully. When they saw Helen coming to the tower, they lowered their voices. "Who on earth," they asked one another, "could blame the Trojan and Achaean men-at-arms for suffering so long for such a woman's sake? Indeed, she is the very image of an immortal goddess. All the same, and lovely as she is, let her sail home, and not stay here to vex us and our children after us." Meanwhile, Priam had called Helen to his side. "Dear child," he said, "come here and sit in front of me, so that you may see your former husband and your relatives and friends. I bear you no ill will at all. I blame the gods. It is they who brought this terrible Achaean war upon me. And now you can tell me the name of that giant over there. Who is that tall and handsome Achaean?" "There are others, taller by a head, but I have never set eyes on a man with such good looks, or with such majesty. He is every inch a king." "I pay you homage and reverence, my dear father-in-law," replied the gracious Lady Helen. "I wish I had chosen to die in misery before I came here with your son, deserting my bridal chamber, my kinsfolk, my darling daughter, and the dear friends with whom I had grown up. But things did not fall out like that, to my unending sorrow. However, I must tell you what you wish to know. The man you pointed out is Imperial Agamemnon, son of Atreus, a good king and a mighty spearman too. He was my brother-in-law once, shameless creature that I am, unless all that was a dream." When he heard this, the old man gazed at Agamemnon with envious admiration. "Ah, lucky son of Atreus!" he exclaimed, "child of fortune, blessed by the gods! So you are the man whom all these thousands of Achaeans serve. I went to Phrygia once, the land of vines and galloping horses, and learnt how numerous the Phrygians are when I saw the armies of Atreus and King Mygdon encamped by the river Sangarius. I was their ally, and I bivouacked with them that time the Amazons, who fight like men, came up to the attack. But even they were not as many as these Achaeans with their flashing eyes." The old man, noticing Ulysses next, said, "Tell me now, dear child, who that man is. He is shorter than King Agamemnon by a head, but broader in the shoulders and the chest. He has left his armor lying on the ground, and there he goes like a bellwether, inspecting the ranks. He reminds me of a fleecy ram bringing a great flock of white sheep to heel." "That," said Helen, child of Zeus, "is Laertes' son, Ulysses of the nimble wits. Ithaca, where he was brought up, is a poor and rocky land, but he is a master of intrigue and stratagem." The wise Antenor added something to Helen's picture of Ulysses. "Madam," he said, "I can endorse what you say, for Ulysses has been here. He came with Menelaus on an embassy in your behalf, and I was their host. I entertained them in my own house, and I know not only what they look like, but the way they think. In conference with the Trojans, when all were standing, Menelaus with his broad shoulders overtopped the whole company. But Ulysses was the more imposing of the two when both were seated." When their turn came to express their views in public, Menelaus spoke fluently, not at great length, but very clearly, being a man of few words who kept to the point, though he was the younger of the two. By contrast, when the nimble-witted Ulysses took the floor, he stood there with his head bent firmly down, glancing from under his brows. And he did not swing his staff either to the front or back, but held it stiffly, as though he had never handled one before. You would have taken him for a sulky fellow, and no better than a fool. But when that great voice of his came booming from his chest, and the words poured from his lips like flakes of winter snow, there was no man alive who could compete with Ulysses. When we looked at him then, we were no longer misled by appearances. Aias was the third man whom the old king noticed and inquired about. "Who is that other fine and upstanding Achaean?" he asked. "Taller than all the rest by head and shoulders?" "That," said the gracious Lady Helen of the Long Robe, "is the huge Aias, a tower of strength to the Achaeans. And there on the other side is Idomeneus, standing among the Cretans like a god, with his Cretan captains gathered around him. My lord Menelaus often entertained him in our house, when he paid us a visit from Crete. And now I have picked out all the Achaeans whom I can recognize and name, except two chieftains whom I cannot find, Castor the tamer of horses, and Polydeuces the great boxer, my own brothers, born by the same mother as myself. Either they did not join the army from lovely Lacedaemon, or if they crossed the seas and came here with the rest, they are unwilling to take part in the fighting on account of the scandal attached to my name, and the insults they might hear." But she did not know, when she said this, that the fruitful earth had already received them in her lap, over there in Lacedaemon, in the country that they loved. And now we'll have a pause. I know it's short, I know. I'm used to longer sittings, but anyway, I want to drink tea. My mouth is dry. Here. Oh yeah, I'm still I didn't explain to you that I'm in charge of all the technical aspects, because Mr. is gone away for a while on holidays. So I have to take care of all the technical aspects and everything. It's not my favorite part of the streaming, but anyway, I have to do it. So see you in 5 minutes anyway. Hey, welcome back. So thank you, Agail. So I'm happy it's not all that bad. I hope I'm improving as well. Don't know about that, but anyway. Sometimes, when you're a bit tired, you get all mixed up and you change the names, especially that they're hard names to pronounce and everything. Greek names. Why did they invent Greek names? Anyway, yeah. I'll just go straight on through the second part, and yeah, if you have questions, just ask them in the chat, and we'll talk about that at the end. I'll read the chat at the end. I'll try to read it out loud this time, which I didn't do. Oh, and by the way, you might have noticed, or not, I don't know, in this version, in this translation I have here, Ulysses is supposed to be called Odysseus. And since I find it a bit, I don't know, we're used to Ulysses, so I decided voluntarily to change Odysseus to Ulysses. So when I read, instead of saying Odysseus, I said Ulysses. So I think it's a bit more clear, especially that I know that some of you are French, and we're used to this version, Ulysses. So anyway, it's just a question of being a bit more familiar, because it's not easy, because there's a lot of people, and so I just try to make it as listenable as possible. Here, second part. Heralds, meanwhile, were bringing through the town the wherewithal for the treaty of peace: 2 sheep and a goatskin bottle full of mellow wine, the fruit of the soil. The herald Idaeus, who carried a gleaming bowl and golden cups, came up to the old king and roused him to action. "Up, my lord," he said. "The commanders of the Trojan and Achaean forces are calling for you to come down onto the plain and make a truce. Paris and the warrior Menelaus are going to fight each other with long spears for Helen. The winner is to have the lady, good and all, while the rest make a treaty of peace, by which we stay in deep-soiled Troy, and the enemy sail home to Argos, where the horses graze, and Achaea, land of lovely women." The old man shuddered when he heard this, but he told his men to harness horses to his chariot, and they promptly obeyed. Priam mounted and drew back the reins. Antenor got into the splendid chariot beside him, and they drove their fast horses through the Scaean gate towards the open country. When they reached the assembled armies, they stepped down from their chariot onto the bountiful earth, and walked to a spot midway between the Trojans and Achaeans. King Agamemnon and the resourceful Ulysses rose at once, and stately heralds brought the victims for the sacrifice together, mixed wine in the bowl, and poured some water on the king's hands. Then Agamemnon drew the knife that he always carried beside the great scabbard of his sword, and cut some hair from the lambs' heads. The hair was distributed among the Trojan and Achaean captains by the heralds. And now Agamemnon lifted up his hands and prayed aloud in the hearing of all. "Father Zeus, you that rule from Mount Ida, most glorious and great, and you the sun, whose eye and ear miss nothing in the world, you rivers and you earth, you powers of the world below that make the souls of dead men pay for perjury, I call on you all to witness our oaths, and to see that they are kept. If Paris kills Menelaus, let him keep Helen and her wealth, and we shall sail away in our sea-going ships. But if red-haired Menelaus kills Paris, the Trojans must surrender Helen and all her possessions, and compensate the Argives suitably, on a scale that future generations shall remember. And if, in the event of Paris' death, Priam and his sons refuse to pay, I shall stay here and fight for the indemnity until the war is finished." Agamemnon now slit the lamb's throats with the relentless bronze and dropped them gasping on the ground, where the life force ebbed and left them, for the knife had done its work. Then they drew wine from the bowl in cups, and as they poured it on the ground they made their petitions to the gods that have been since time began. The watching Trojans and Achaeans prayed as well. The same prayer served them both. Zeus, most glorious and great, and you other immortal gods, may the brains of whichever party breaks this treaty be poured out on the ground as that wine is poured, and not only theirs but their children's too, and may foreigners possess their wives. Such were their hopes of peace, but Zeus had no intention yet of bringing peace about. Dardanian Priam now made himself heard. Trojans and Achaean men-at-arms, he said, attend to me. I am going back to windy Ilium, since I cannot bear to look on while my own son fights the formidable Menelaus. All I can think is that Zeus and the other immortal gods must know already which of the two is going to his doom. With these words, the venerable king put the lambs in the car, and himself mounted and drew back the reins. Antenor took his place beside him in a splendid chariot, and the two drove off on their way back to Ilium. Priam's son Hector and the admirable Ulysses proceeded to measure out the ground, and then to cast lots from a metal helmet to see which of the two should throw his bronze spear first. The watching armies prayed, with their hands raised to the gods. The same prayer served them both. Father Zeus, you that rule from Mount Ida, most glorious and great, let the man who brought these troubles on both peoples die, and go down to the house of Hades, and let peace be established between us. They made their prayers, and now great Hector of the flashing helmet shook the lots, turning his eyes aside. One of the lots leapt out at once. It was that of Paris. The troops sat down in rows, each man by his high-stepping horses, where his ornate arms were piled, and Prince Paris, husband of Helen of the lovely hair, put on his beautiful armour. He began by tying round his legs a pair of splendid greaves, which were fitted with silver clips for the ankles. Next he put a cuirass on his breast. It was his brother Lycaon's, and he had to adjust it. Over his shoulder he slung a bronze sword with a silver-studded hilt, and then a great thick shield. On his sturdy head he set a well-made helmet. It had a horsehair crest, and the plume nodded grimly from the top. Last, he took up a powerful spear, which was fitted to his grip. Battle-loving Menelaus also equipped himself in the same way, and when both had got themselves ready, each behind his own front line, they strode out between the two forces, looking so terrible that the spectators were spellbound, horse-taming Trojans and Achaean men-at-arms alike. The two men took their stations not far from one another on the measured piece of ground, and, in mutual fury, brandished their weapons. Paris was the first to hurl his long-shadowed spear. It landed on the round shield of Menelaus, but the bronze did not break through. The point was bent back by the stout shield. Then Menelaus, son of Atreus, brought his spear into play with a prayer to Father Zeus. "Grant me revenge, King Zeus, on Paris, the man who wronged me in the beginning. Use my hands to bring him down, so that our children's children may still shudder at the thought of injuring a host who has received them kindly." With that, he balanced his long-shadowed spear and hurled it. The heavy weapon struck the round shield of Priam's son. It pierced through the glittering shield, forced its way through the ornate cuirass, and pressing straight on, tore the tunic of Paris' flank, but Paris swerved, and so avoided death. Menelaus then drew his silver-mounted sword, swung it back, and brought it down on the ridge of his enemy's helmet. But the sword broke on the helmet. into 6 pieces and dropped from his hands. Menelaus gave a groan and looked up at the broad sky. "For the deuce!" he cried. "Is there a god more spiteful than yourself? I thought I had paid out Paris for his infamy, and now my sword breaks in my hand, when I have already cast a spear for nothing and never touched the man." With that he hurled himself at Paris, seized him by the horsehair crest, and swinging him around, began to drag him into the Achaean lines. Paris was choked by the pressure on his tender throat of the embroidered helmet strap, which he had fitted tightly round his chin, of course, and Menelaus would have howled him in and covered himself with glory, but for the quickness of Aphrodite, daughter of Zeus, who saw what was happening and broke the strap for Paris, though it was made of leather from a slaughtered ox. So the helmet came away empty in the great hand of the noble Menelaus. He tossed it with a swing into the Achaean lines, where it was picked up by his own retainers, and flung himself at his enemy again in the hope of dispatching him with his bronze-pointed spear. But Aphrodite used her powers once more. Hiding Paris in a dense mist, she whisked him off. It was an easy feat for the goddess, and put him down in his own perfume-fragrant bedroom. Then she went herself to summon Helen. She found Helen on the high tower, surrounded by Trojan women. Aphrodite put out her hand, plucked at her sweet-scented robe, and spoke to her in the disguise of an old woman she was very fond of, a wool-worker who used to make beautiful wool for her when she lived in Lacedaemon. "Come," said the goddess, mimicking this woman. "Paris wants you to go home to him. There he is in his room, on the inlaid bed, radiant in his beauty and his lovely clothes. You would never believe that he had just come in from a duel. You would think he was going to a dance or had just stopped dancing and sat down to rest." Helen was perturbed and looked at the goddess. When she observed the beauty of her neck and her lovely breast and sparkling eyes, she was struck with awe. But she made no pretense of being deceived. "Lady of mysteries," she said, "what is the object of this mummery? Now that Menelaus has beaten Paris and is willing to take home his erring wife, you are plotting, I suppose, to carry me off to some still more distant city, in Phrygia or in lovely Maeonia, for some other favourite of yours who may be living in those parts. So you begin by coming here and try to lure me back to Paris. No. Go and sit with him yourself. Forget that you are a goddess, never set foot in Olympus again, but devote yourself to Paris. Pamper him well, and one day you may be his wife, or else his slave. I refuse to go and share his bed again. I should never hear the end of it. There is not a woman in Troy who would not curse me if I did. I have enough to bear already." The lady Aphrodite rounded on her in fury. "Obstinate wretch!" she cried. "Do not provoke me, or I might desert you in my anger, and hate you as heartily as I have loved you up till now, rousing the Trojans and Achaeans to such bitter enmity as would bring you to a miserable end." Helen was cowed, child of Zeus though she was. She wrapped herself up in her white and glossy robe, and went off without a sound. Not one of the Trojan women saw her go. She had a goddess to guide her. When they reached the beautiful house of Paris, the maids in attendance betook themselves at once to their tasks, while Helen, the great lady, went to her lofty bedroom. There the goddess herself, laughter-loving Aphrodite, picked up a chair, carried it across the room, and put it down for her in front of Paris. Helen, daughter of Aegis-bearing Zeus, sat down on it, but turned her eyes aside and began scolding her lover. "So you are back from the battlefield, and I was hoping you had fallen there to the great soldier who was once my husband. You used to boast that you were a better man than the mighty Menelaus, a finer spearman, stronger in the arm. Then why not go at once and challenge him again? Or should I warn you to think twice before you offer single combat to the red-haired Menelaus? Do nothing rash, or you may end by falling to his spear." Paris had his answer ready. "My dear," he said, "do not try to put me on my mettle by abusing me. Menelaus has just beaten me with Athene's help, but I too have gods to help me, and next time I shall win. Come, let us go to bed together and be happy in our love. Never has such desire overwhelmed me, not even in the beginning, when I carried you off from lovely Lacedaemon in my sea-going ships, and we spent the night on the Isle of Crania in each other's arms. Never till now have I been so much in love with you, or felt such sweet desire." As he spoke, he made a move towards the bed, leading her to it. His wife followed him, and the two lay down together on the well-made wooden bed. Meanwhile, Menelaus was prowling through the ranks like a wild beast trying to find Prince Paris, but not a man among the Trojans or their famous allies could point him out to the warrior Menelaus. Not that if anyone had seen him he would have hidden him for love. They loathed him, all of them, like death. In the end, King Agamemnon made a pronouncement. "Trojans, Dardanians, and allies, listen to me. The great Menelaus has won. There is no disputing that. Now give up Argive Helen and her wealth, and compensate me suitably on a scale that future generations shall remember." Atreus had spoken. The Achaeans all applauded. Yay, yay, yay! End of the chapter, yes, already. It's finished. So, tell me how you liked it. What do you think? I was expecting a great big battle and everything, and instead we have, I don't know, we have plenty of other things actually happening. It started as a battle, and then no, and then maybe, and then and then he even ends up like making love to Helen. Like, what? We weren't expecting that at all, were we? So anyway, yeah, you can always use the chat, and yeah, I'll just put the other screen on, and yeah, before I go though, yeah, at least I hoped you enjoyed that more than last week, which was quite tiresome. Yeah, so if you want, you have all the Facebook and Twitter pages and everything, if you want to follow, if you want to share, so if you liked it and everything, if you know, I don't know, you can even talk about it to people, your friends, your family, if you know metalheads, gamers, whatever, even if you have students, I don't know, if you're a teacher, or if you're still at school, talk about it to your classmates or whatever. Yes, that's not very nice, I know. Anyway, yeah, I also have my Tumblr. I already talked about it at the beginning of the show, but I think it's nice, and I'm putting some time into it, and I'm telling my own little stories, not anyone else's stories. It's Lenorae's stories, and yeah. So Tuesday it's in French at 9 o'clock, and Thursdays in English 9 o'clock as well, every week, like today. And it's still the same book, in both languages, so if you want to improve on your French, you can listen to Tuesday's chapter. Especially that in the order I'm doing it right now, we've done the chapter 3 today in English, and it will be as well chapter 3 in French next Tuesday. So yeah, thank you everyone. Everyone, yes. And yeah, I'll see you next time, and I'll bid you good night. And that's it. I'll leave the chat open a bit if you want. And yeah, try to be nice though. It's not very polite. See you, bye bye. If I manage to do that right.